Hi guys, Mrs. Herrington here. I am so sorry about the chaos on Teams this morning. So to make up for that, as I said, I'd come over here and I'd make you your recorded video. We're going to read Zathura today by Chris Van Allsburg as we continue with our author study remotely. And as we look at this, it is called Zathura, a Space Adventure. We read another Chris Van Allsburg book based on a board game, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this one too. Mom! Danny Budwing yelled. Mom! Walter and Danny's mother stopped at her son's bedroom door. Walter, she said, get off your brother. Honestly, if you don't stop pulling on his nose like that, it'll end up looking like an elephant's trunk. Oh, yeah, said Walter. Then he'll need the ears to match. And he let go of Danny's nose and he grabbed onto his ears. Enough, Mrs. Budwing shouted. Danny started it. Look what he did. Walter yelled, picking up his walkie-talkie. The antenna was dangling by a wire. See? He breaks everything. I'm sure he didn't mean to, Mrs. Budwing said. It was an accident, Danny mumbled. From downstairs, Mr. Budwing called to his wife. We're going to be late. We're going to be late. Mrs. Budwing gave her sons a kiss goodbye. I set some dinner out in the kitchen. Dad and I shouldn't be too late. Can't you take him with you? Walter whined. Look at him. He's down there holding his poor little nose from where his brother was tugging on it. Doesn't sound like Walter wants to babysit his brother. After their parents left, Walter sat down in front of the television. Doesn't sound like he's going to play with him either. Can me and you go outside and play catch together? Danny asked. It's you and I, said Walter. Sounds like Walter's the older brother. Not you and me, not me and you. And the answer is no. Danny really wanted to play, so he threw Walter his hat, but Walter just ignored him. Then he tossed him a baseball, but the baseball beamed him on the head. Well, that got his attention because Walter jumped up. All right, you little fungus, now you're really going to get it. And Danny bolted out of the room, down the hall, out the front door, with Walter close behind. They ran into the park right across the street, but Danny couldn't outrun his brother. Walter tackled him. I'm telling, Danny squealed as Walter got a grip on his nose and pulled, and then he let go. Hey, what's that? He said. Right next to the boys was a long, thin box resting against a tree. Walter got off his brother and picked it up. Aw, it's just some dumb old game. Here, he said, poking Danny in the stomach with the box. It's for babies like you. He trotted off as Danny read the words on the box. Jumanji, a jungle adventure? Danny stuck the game under his arm and ran home after his brother. Look at that Jumanji game over there. Walter sure goes after his little brother's nose a lot. I don't think I'd touch anybody's nose. Back inside, remember I told you guys earlier there was going to be a connection to the Jumanji game or the Jumanji book? Back inside, Danny looked at the box. It was covered with pictures of jungle animals. He took the dice out, some tokens, and a very plain game board. Walter was right. It was a babyish game and probably boring too. Danny started to put it away, but he discovered, jammed tightly onto the bottom of the box, another board was sitting there. He banged the box on the ground, and it popped out. This board was more interesting than the first one, and it showed flying saucers and rockets and planets in outer space with a path of colored squares leading from Earth to a purple planet called Zathura and back to Earth. Danny put a token on Earth, then rolled the dice. After he'd moved along the path, something surprising happened. A buzzing sound came from the board, and with a click, a small green card popped out of the edge right in front of him. He picked it up and read, Meteor showers take evasive action? Hey, Walter, Danny started to say. What does And that's when he was interrupted by a noisy rat-a-tat-tat sound coming from the roof. Evasive means trying to move around, escape. Oh, show you the picture. It's pretty cool. So look at him back there watching that board game. Little brothers, man. I have a little brother. Excuse me. Walter looked up from the television. Holy smoke, he said. It must be a hailstorm. It's not hail, shouted Danny. I miss a page here. Nope. Okay. It's not hail, shouted Danny, holding up the card. It's meteors. The noise grew louder. Like 1,000 golf balls bouncing off the roof of the house. The room got so dark, Walter turned on the lights. Then, kaboom! A rock the size of the refrigerator fell through the ceiling of the house and crushed the television. See? Danny said, I told you, meteors. Walter stared at the hole in the ceiling. I don't know if I had a hole happen in the ceiling of my house while I was home watching my brother, I think I'd get in a lot of trouble. Okay, he agreed, meteors. But how'd it get so dark so fast? Through the hole, he could see what was left of his parents' bedroom, and beyond that, a black star-filled sky. It looks like night up there. It's not night, said Denny. It's outer space. What are you talking about? Geez, outer space? Walter muttered as he went to the front door. We just lost track of time is all. It's night. That's all it is. He threw open the door and almost took a step outside before he realized there was no outside anymore, at least not the one he expected. The hole the size of a meteor came through, or of a refrigerator came through the ceiling of the house. Uh-oh. Never start a board game that you don't know how to play. I kind of think we're starting to get that. See? Said Danny. Outer space. And he led Walter back to the living room and showed him the Zathura game board and the card. Walter sat with his head in his hands, gazing at the path of colored squares that wound around the board that ended back at Earth. Looks like, said Danny, we keep on playing or we're up here forever. Great, said Walter, up here with you forever. He took a deep breath. He put a token on Earth, and then he rolled the dice and moved along the path. The board started buzzing, and click, a card popped out. He studied it silently, then tossed the card on the board. Danny leaned forward and read, The polarity on your gravity belt is reversed. I wonder what that means, he thought too. He looked up, but Walter was gone. Oh, I forgot to show you the cool picture. Look, they're in outer space. Wow. So their house has taken off of the planet. It's ended up in outer space. Walter's role ended up in the reverse of polarity. Walter, he called out. Up here, answered Walter. Danny looked up, saw his brother pressed against the ceiling. I've lost my gravity. That's not all you're going to lose, Danny said nervously, because he could see that Walter was being pulled slowly towards the hole in the ceiling. A lonely trip into outer space was coming. Walter realized it too and started clawing at the ceiling, but he couldn't keep himself from moving closer and closer to the hole. Danny looked around. Lying next to the meteor was the cord from the shattered television. He tossed it to Walter, who knotted it tightly to his belt. Danny grabbed the other end of the cord and tied his brother to the sofa. Even though his brother was mean to him, he's gonna try to save his brother's life. It's good. Danny rolled the dice and moved his token along the path. Click! Out popped another card. Your gyroscope is malfunctioning. Suddenly, the house tilted. Everything in the room slid to one side, and Danny got buried under a mountain of furniture. He slowly dug himself out, clutching the game, only to find that Walter was floating back toward the hole in the ceiling. Danny tied him to the sofa again and handed up the dice. Walter rolled and got his gravity back, dropping to the floor with a thud. Danny moved his piece and handed him his card. Your robot is defective, Walter read. Oh, man. What it is about these board games that just totally destroy your house. From the hallway came the sound of rattling metal and a steady clank, clank, clank. The boys stared at the doorway as a shiny silver robot stepped into view. He was having trouble walking on the tilted floor. His head rotated back and forth and seemed to freeze on Walter. The robot's eyes lit up, and he spoke in an odd mechanical voice. Emergency! Emergency! Alien life form must destroy! His claw-like metal hands snapped open and shut. Uh-oh! Danny whispered. I think he's talking about you! Fortunately, when the robot stepped forward, he missed the door, banged into the wall, and fell to the floor. He got up and did it again, and then again. Better hurry up and roll, said Walter, before he makes it here. Danny rolled the dice and took his card. You passed too close to Taurus 3. Gravity greatly increased. The room began to level out, but something strange was happening to Danny. Walter looked at him. Holy smokes, he said. Danny was getting shorter and wider, too. Soon he was about the size and shape of a large beach ball. Walter, he said in a low voice, I feel very heavy. Destroy alien life forms, the robot repeated. Destroy alien life forms. From the hall, as he picked himself up again. This time, he made it through the door and headed for Walter. Danny yelled to his brother, Push me! What? Said Walter. Push me! Danny yelled again. Just push me! Walter bent down and gave his brother a shove. Danny rolled across the room and, like a giant bowling ball, knocked the robot over and flattened his legs. Did I get him? Asked Danny, who couldn't see because he had rolled up against a wall and was now upside down. Walter pushed him back to the game board. You sure did, he said, patting his brother on the head. You were terrific. Walter picked up the dice and rolled. He took his card, and his hand trembled as he read, Zorgon pirate ship launches photon attack? Oh, no. This doesn't look like it's going to end well. Through the window, the boys saw a spaceship. 2 points of light shot from the ship and headed directly for the Budwing house. The first one hit the chimney and sent bricks falling into the fireplace. The second hit the upstairs bathroom. Water began dripping from the hole in the ceiling. Walter handed the dice to Danny, who had a hard time lifting his short, heavy arm. He rolled, and as Walter moved his token for him, he slowly returned back to his normal shape. A card popped out, and Danny read it silently. This is bad, he said. Zorgon pirates board your vessel. The room shook as the spaceship banged up against the house, and the boys heard footsteps on the roof. Through the opening in the ceiling, they saw someone or something climb through the hole in the roof and enter the room above them. Danny and Walter moved to the hallway, standing behind the flattened robot. They held each other, too terrified to move. A humming sound came from their feet. They looked down and they saw the robot's eyes light up. He lifted his head, fixed his eyes on the hole in the ceiling, and spoke. Alien life form must destroy. His claw-like hands twitched, but he couldn't get up. Oh, I didn't even show you that picture. There's the spaceship that's about to board their house, or has boarded their house. Danny and Walter helped him to his feet. He staggered forward as the pirate's scaly tail and lizard-like legs swung down from the hole. The robot lifted one of his claws and snapped it sharply around the creature's tail. The Zorgon howled, jerking himself back through the hole, with the robot still attached. He thrashed and wailed and banged against the wall overhead. Then, minus one arm, the robot dropped down through the hole. The boys heard the Zorgon scramble across the roof and saw the flash of his rockets as his ship sped away. The robot saved them. It seems hopeless. The robot's eyes were dark again. They'd been playing for almost 3 hours now, and their tokens rested a galaxy away from Zathura, and twice that far from Earth. We are never going to make it, said Walter. Sure we are, answered Danny, and he handed the dice to his brother. Me and you, together, we can do it. Walter cradled the dice in his hand and sighed. You and I, he said warily. You and I. He looked at his brother, who was grinning. That's right, said Danny. Together. So it turns out the robot saved them. Walter rolled the dice, a 1 and a 2. He moved his token to the only black square on the board. The card popped out. You have entered a black hole. I don't know why I did that in the robot voice. Sorry. You have entered a black hole, Walter read. Go back in time, 1 hour for each mark on the dice. He jumped up and he looked around the room. You see any black holes? His brother pointed to the floor. A black spot was slowly spreading under Walter's feet, like a perfectly round puddle of ink. At first, Walter thought he was sinking into it, but it was the hole that was rising. He tried to run, but he couldn't feel his feet. And then, as the hole rose higher, he couldn't feel his legs either. What's going on? He cried. Danny looked below the disc-like hole. Walter, he said, the bottom part of you is gone. As the hole rose higher and higher, there was less and less of Walter until only his head remained. Danny tried to pull on the hole to save what was left of his brother, but his hands passed through the blackness as if it were made of smoke. His chin dropped to his chest and he began to sob and cry. Danny! Walter called softly. Danny! And Danny looked up at his brother's floating head. Danny, he began, I never told you this, but And that was all he got to say, because the hole kept rising past his mouth, past his nose, and finally right over the top of his head. Oh no. I wonder what he was going to tell his brother. I don't know, if I only had a couple seconds left, I wonder what I would tell my brother. I might tell my brother that I loved him. Walter was completely swallowed up, floating in empty darkness. He closed his eyes and he began to spin, plunging head over heels through the pitch-black space. Then, thud! He landed hard on his knees. There was something in his arms, something wriggling around. and he opened his eyes, and he found himself back in the park by his house. He had an arm wrapped tightly around Danny's neck, a hand gripping the boy's nose. "I'm telling," Danny squealed. Walter let go and he fell back on the grass. He was dizzy, very dizzy. Danny jumped up and started to run, but stopped. "Hey," he said, "what's that?" He went to a tree and he picked up a box resting against the trunk. He held up the box and he held it out to Walter. "Look," he said, "it's some kind of game." So a black hole sucked him through time and sent him 3 hours into the past. And this is what was happening to them 3 hours earlier. Walter grabbed it. "Hey, give it back," said Danny. His brother got to his feet. "You don't want to play this," he said. "Trust me. I tried playing it once." And he went over to a trash can and he jammed the box deep inside. "Come on," he said. "I've got a better idea. Let's go play catch. Let's go do anything." Danny smiled. "You mean it? Together? Me and you?" Walter put his arm around his brother. "Yeah, that's right," he said. "Me and you together." So it sounds like he was willing to play anything except that game. And if it hadn't been for the black hole that Walter ended up in, that made him realize that he really did and really should love his brother, he might still be stuck in outer space. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking it out through the technology struggle today. And thank you guys for listening to our read aloud. I miss your faces and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, hopefully with working computers, technology, iPads. But go outside, get some sun today. It's beautiful. And I will see you soon.